How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 4. I don't know what this one is called. Honestly, the first two chapters had very memorable names because they were kind of related to things that you would hear in the game. Maybe not so much Chapter 1, but that was Onikakushi, and then Chapter 2 is probably the easiest to remember because it's the name of the festival, Watanagashi. I actually never memorized the name of Chapter 3, and I have no idea what the name of Chapter 4 is. Nevertheless, here we are. I believe this is the absolute final chapter of what people call the question arc, where I get confused, you guys laugh at me, and maybe get confused with me, and you all hear my predictions as I slowly, but definitely surely, lose my mind. And that definitely happened in Chapter 3. Wowzers, did that happen in Chapter 3. And probably because of how mind-blown, or I guess not necessarily mind-blown, but let's go with mind-fucked I am from Chapter 3, I really just want to hop into Chapter 4 and see what the remainder of the question arc has to offer. So, in the last episode of Chapter 3, when we were doing the all-cast review, Rena was saying that we're done with the questions arc, which means they weren't really planning this, and that's what she also said. This is a bit of an extra thing that they weren't exactly planning on making, but they did, and here we are. And the actual big next title would be Chapter 5, which apparently has Shion as the main protagonist, which I'm very excited for, because Shion keeps on getting the short end of the stick. Very unlucky that she is, and I feel like there's a lot to learn from somebody that is a part of the Sonozakis. Even so, she's not Mion specifically, she's still a Sonozaki. I feel like there's a lot that we can learn from somebody really that's just not Keiichi, because I'm beginning to doubt him. But enough of the other chapters, let's jump into Chapter 4, which seems to follow Rika-chan, with all of them following at least one of the main characters. We started with Rena in Chapter 1, Chapter 2 went into Mion, and you can definitely tell that was Mion's story, and same thing with Sotoko's being the previous chapters. So we'll see here how this relates with Rika-chan, and maybe we can get a little bit of clarity on her, because she definitely seems to have a lot of a Yashiro-sama mystery related to her. Let's jump into it. Yeehaw and God Bless America. That's the name of it, I think. How do you spell that? Or how do you pronounce that? Himatsubushi. Himatsubushi. For you, the final mystery. Yeehaw. As I just said, the time-killing chapter. Hell yeah. I now entrust you with all the mysteries hidden within Higurashi When They Cry. However comical it may be, if you have reached any conjecture, then you have passed. This final novel is a meager reward for you. Conjecture is impossible. You have the right to reject this story. What does that mean? So, we don't have to believe the events of this chapter once we go through it? It's basically just up to us? Why do we have to hear laughter at the beginning and the ends of these chapters? It's not fun. Especially when it sounds like a child's laughter. Or a baby's laughter, even. That was the last one that we heard. This arc includes choices that were added to the console version. These choices result in dialogue changes and can lead to bad ends. What the fuck? Are you serious? Really? Do you want to see these choices? Skip additional choices, show only content from the PC versions, prompt additional choices from the console version, prompt choices and highlight correct answers. I don't know what to choose here. I wasn't expecting this. Nobody prepared me for this. Nobody backseat gamed enough for me to be ready for this. Well, okay. I mean, I don't mind bad ends. That means it's just more work for me, but I'm down to see what the choices are. Why not? And I guess I should probably have them highlighted because I'm an idiot? I don't know. Maybe I can do like all the right choices and then just go back and do all the wrong choices. I don't want to read this. I've come to learn that these bits of poetry in the beginning I will just forget. But who is the criminal? That is a good question. Midsummer 1985? Wait, we're going forward in time here. And my dog doesn't like that. I had misread the time and ended up arriving too early. The schedule board flipped with a series of clacks. My flight to Sapporo was still a bit later on. I still had over an hour before boarding. Well, I might as well close my eyes for a bit on that bench over there then. I came here directly from work, so maybe the fatigue from that was making me sleepy. Finding a suitable bench, I put my luggage on the seat next to me and settled down. Akasaka. That name seems a little familiar. Is that who we're following in this story? I sighed like an old man. I had hoped to stay young forever, but had become splendidly middle-aged. Apparently, the rumor that even people in the latter half of their 20s experience a decline in their physical strength wasn't a lie. It had been mind-numbingly busy at work lately, so I rarely had any time to myself. This might have been the first time I'd been able to enjoy a journey alone like this since I was a student. The reason behind this trip was to meet with an old friend. It was a bit strange to call him an old friend. In fact, it might be better to call him a bad one. After retiring a couple years ago, he moved to Sapporo, his mother's hometown. His mother passed away soon after, and he was now peacefully enjoying his second lease on life. His name was Kurado Oshi. He was a former detective from the primary investigation unit at the station in Okonomiya, whatever prefecture. To be honest, the only direct contact we ever had didn't last more than 3 days. After that, we exchanged New Year's cards, but never met again. So this would be the first time meeting him in 7 years. Then why does the name seem familiar? Is it just a name that I recognize from something else that isn't this? Whatever. Well, we're definitely forward in time compared to the other chapters because, well, I think those took place in 1983. It's 1985, and Ueshi is retired. So I wonder how the state of things are. In other words, we met 7 years ago in 1978. There was something I just had to ask to talk to him about concerning that time. To explain that it was impossible not to recall the incident that happened back then. That kidnapping, the details and resolution of which were resigned to darkness. Also, it was impossible not to recall a certain mysterious girl. My name is Mamoru Akasaka. It was a year that had been strangely hot, even though it was only June. Oh, are we going back in time now? Yes, we are. What the fuck? Alright. Well, I wonder how the state of things are here.
Sensei, sayonara!
はい、さようなら。車に気をつけるんですよ。
Don't tell me what to do.
友達の家に寄り道なんかしないように。
Wait, what? Don't drop in at a friend's house? What if I want to?
明日の教科書の準備は必ず寝る前にしておくんですよ。
Clatter, clatter, clatter. The lively sounds of children running towards the hallway.
でさ、つってんだぜ。
そんなの俺持ってるわよ。いらねえよ。
The unique high-pitched voice of youth. The energetic shrill of the cicadas went completely unheard by their ears. Children returning home from school split off one by one from their groups of friends as they went through intersections of the residential area. Even though there were several of them in a group as they left the school, as they got closer to their homes, their numbers dwindled. That's why the fewer friends you were walking home with acted as an indicator that you were that much closer to your destination.
じゃあな、あばよ。
また明日ね。
He finally parted ways with his last friend. A van was parked at a bend in the road. The window was open, the sound of the radio leaking outside. It must have been the news or something.
たため、道路交通法違反、 公務執行妨害で3名を逮捕しました。
We quickly lost our lovely peaceful music. And also, wow, I totally forgot to mention the music. So people in, I guess, all the chapters so far have been stating their comments on the types of music that I've been choosing, both the old and the new. And the issue being the timings. I'm hoping that with what I selected, which I've already forgotten, so I don't know if I'm listening to the old or new music, that the timings of sound effects and whenever the songs start are correct. Honestly, I have no preference on the music. I think the old and new are fine, enough to forget which is which, but I don't want the timings of the songs to be really fucky, and I noticed it being very fucky with those sound effects when we saw our old friend Rika-chan taking a nice snooze, an eternal snooze, may I add, at the shrine near the end of Chapter 3. That was kind of messy, and I did not like that. It really ruined that whole, surprise. So hopefully whatever I selected, and like I said, I already forgot, is okay enough, but, excuse me, it's not one of the choices that I chose last time, because I think it's like a mix of old and new. I just don't remember the mix. I think it's the new music, but with the old sound effect timings or something. I don't know. Anyways.
一連のHinamizawaダム建設反対をめぐる運動は、先月の機動隊との流血事件を境に過激化の一途をたどっており、
Oh, fantastic.
警察では過激な活動家による次の事件を警戒しています。先週も建設省庁舎前での犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件があったばかりで、
Well, in my head, I was thinking this should be around the time that the damn shit's going on. The boy's ears perked up at the mention of the name Unukai. At that moment, a man's face peeked out suddenly from the window of the van. His behavior was a little different than that of a man looking around to see if there was any oncoming traffic before he opened the door to his vehicle. His eyes meeting suddenly with the unfamiliar man, the boy panicked slightly.
ウグイス OK。
What?
ひばり OK。前後2ブロック確保した。いいぞ。
The man in the passenger seat whispered quietly. Nodding in acknowledgement, the man opened the door and stood before the boy.
君、犬飼俊樹君?
While asking that, the man peered at the boy's name tag. Toshiki Unukai. The name was written plainly there. Well, that seemed very, dangerous. The phone rang for a third time. If he reached out, he could easily pick up the receiver. However, he was concerned that if he picked it up before he had finished ringing once, or it had even finished ringing once, whoever was on the other end of the line would think him a fairly cheap person. And that's why he normally never picked up the phone until the third ring. Even he thought it was it was a worthless habit, excuse me. However, his thinking that there isn't much meaning in waiting for just 3 rings, wouldn't waiting for 5 be alright, was very much a reality. His mind filled with such trifling thoughts, he picked up the phone after the 3rd ring had finished, its reverb dampened by his action.
はい。もしもし。もしもし。
He knew that sometimes due to a malfunction of the switchboard, calls didn't connect well. At those times, it was best to hang up and let the person on the other end call again. Thinking that, the moment he began to hang up the phone, he sensed that he was definitely connected after all, and he felt the presence of the person on the other end of the line keeping silent.
もしもし。
There was no way he didn't hear his question, or they didn't hear his question. What was the meaning of this? It wasn't like he didn't know that people could use silent calls to harass others. However, he'd never received a call like that until today. Maybe he was just unlucky before, or lucky before, excuse me. Damn, what is with all these mistakes I'm making? But he didn't believe that he would receive such a call on this phone. There were no direct calls to or from this line. Everything had to go through an operator. Therefore, there was absolutely no way the call would be connected unless it was verified that there was somebody else on the other end of the line. And that's why he didn't understand how to deal with the silent call, and instead settled into confusion.
あんた、誰だか知らないが、用がないなら切るよ。また、かけ直してください。
Intending that to be a parting line, he made to slam down the receiver. It was at that moment the person on the other end spoke for the first time.
あなたが名乗ってくれないから困ってんですよ。あんたが犬飼大臣じゃないなら、さっさと電話を切ってください。
Interesting. He couldn't help but be surprised by the extremely strange voice on the other end of the line. Was there a human alive who could speak with this hoarse and metallic voice? No, this was a voice he had heard somewhere before. That was the kind of voice that was on those lowbrow documentaries that they'd use when they wanted to hide the identity of a speaker, wasn't it? The voice he was hearing over the line was exactly that.
あんた、誰？
だから、それはこっちが聞いてるんですよ。あんた、犬飼大臣じゃないの？
He, Unakai, hesitated to answer, unable to discern the intent of this suspicious phone call. He had a vague feeling that something was off. His boy was kidnapped. That's what's going on here. It's very obvious. He thought about hanging up the phone and asking the operator who initiated the call. However, he forced himself to restrain that urge, and for the time being, chose to state his name and listen.
そうです。犬飼です。名乗りましたよ。
私の名前なんてどうでもいいんです。
Perfect.
まず、あなたがどういう立場に置かれているか。あなたは今、自分の席で電話をしていますね。
I mean, we could be
で
standing.
は、あなたの席の右側の一番下の引き出しを開けてみてください。
The lowest drawer to the right of the minister's chair. There was a lock on it, not enough to function as a safe, but nevertheless it was a drawer that contained some valuable things. And that's why Unakai thought that the person wanted some of the important information contained within that drawer.
すまんが、開けるつもりはないよ。自分の名前も名乗れんやつの言いなりになる言われはない。
引き出しを開けてくれないなら、この電話を切ります。きっと、後悔することになりますよ。まずは引き出しを開けてから考えてもいいんじゃないですか？
Unakai didn't like following orders from the suspicious person one bit. However, he was concerned about what the man had said about regretting it, so he decided to open the drawer. This guy's really easy to persuade. He took the small key he kept stowed in his wallet and unlocked the drawer. His hand stopped right before he opened it. What if there was a bomb inside and it would explode if the drawer was opened? That delusion took hold of him. How would there be a bomb set up in a locked drawer? He quelled that instinct and opened it.
開けてくれましたか？そこにあるものが何かわかりますよね。
これはどういうことだ？おい。
どういうことか説明する必要なんかないですよね。時間を差し上げますので、少しお考えください。また後ほどこちらから連絡いたします。それでは失礼。
おい、待て。もしもし？もしもし？
The call had already ended. That would not change, no matter how much he yelled at it. Even still, Unakai, without realizing that, continued yelling into the receiver for a while. The drawer was still open. On top of the folders crammed into the drawer, it lay there. Toshiki Inukai. Written in plain lettering on a grade schooler's name tag, just lying there. Enshrined there, completely out of place, as if it were cowering. Well, I guess this is a work of fiction, yeehaw, yep. I get it. Higurashi when they cry. That's our little, prologue, if you will. I guess they can get into the drawer, they can just pick the lock. It did say that it was just an ordinary locked drawer, so not the safest thing ever. Do you remember, Yuki? This picture. This is where I first proposed to you. In that brief moment before you nodded back, you probably wouldn't know just how much it seemed like an eternity to me. Yes, I would have never thought that that amount of time could feel like an eternity. Compared to how long I had to wait for you to propose to me, it was... from the moment I met you until today. Compared to the time I've spent since I was born, it might only be a brief period, but they were definitely precious, beautiful days that deserve to be called an eternity. That time continues even now. From now on, I wonder if it'll be a boy, or maybe a girl. Either one is fine. Boy or girl, either way, it's living proof that we love each other. If it's a boy, we'll name it after you, Mamoru. If it's a girl, we'll put the Yuki from my name in hers. Thinking about names is so fun that in the end, we still haven't, decided yet. And there's still time to puzzle over it. Not that long of a time, actually. You see, Yuki, there's something I have to apologize for today. It's about your job. Sorry, it looks like an annoying bit of work has come up. In the worst case, I might not be able to be there for the delivery. It's fine. You have a very important job. What you do protects the way we live. Compared to you, it's nothing. Please go ahead. When you return, I'll be waiting here with our child. Thank you. Also, I'm sorry. Please don't apologize. If you feel guilty about it, then you can just atone. If I atone that much, no matter how much money I have, it won't be enough. Haha, it's a joke. Now go on. Damn, bro, I'd be fucking devastated if I missed the birth of my first child, or a child in general. As I left the room, I bumped into an elderly man. It was Yuki's father. In other words, my father-in-law.
お父さん、邪魔する気はなかったからな。廊下で待たせてもらったよ。聞き耳を立てるつもりはなかったが。ユキは
my bad.
ああいう娘だ。何があっても自分が君の枷になることを望むまい。
私はこれまでユキエに様々な犠牲を強いてきました。出産という人生の節目にまで彼女に犠牲を強いることを恥じます。
君が本当にそう思うなら、仕事が終わったらユキエのために時間を割きなさい。君が仕事を投げ出して付き添ってくれるよりも、そうした方がきっとユキエも喜ぶだろう。
ありがとうございます。
君がとても大切な仕事をしていることは私もよく知っている。自分の仕事を誇りに思いなさい。ユキエは君が見事難題を解決して凱旋するのを楽しみにしている。
はい。
I jumped into the taxi that was waiting outside. Compared to the time when I first got here, the numbers on the fare meter had grown considerably. It seemed the modest time Yuki and I spent together wasn't so modest from an objective point of view.
待たせてすみません。やってください。
いえいえ。では、参りますよ。
The taxi jerked as it changed gears to accelerate, submerging the hospital my wife was in behind a throng of buildings. If it was to end up as a really troublesome ordeal, I probably wouldn't be returning for quite some time. To call a rookie like me, and on top of that, one who's off duty, it seemed that the section chief was calling for all hands on deck. The veteran upper brass gathering on an emergency basis happened occasionally. This was the first time, though, that I experienced everybody gathering together like this. Whatever was happening, there was no doubt it was going to be something novel. Right when my wife was ready to give birth. If I wanted to spend this time to curse my misfortunes, I'd be here all day. Even the verdant ginkgo trees lining the street that always brightened my mood, seemed to lack some of their usual luster. Eventually, the government office came into view. Briefly holding my breath, I let the feelings of tension course through my body once again. I had to remember the work I was doing was important, necessary, and difficult. I composed myself and sharpened my wit. Ready. The taxi stopped in front of the building. Alright. The Police Department Public Safety Division.
室長、全員揃いました。赤坂くん、ブラインドを下ろしてくれる？
The blinds were usually closed when they needed to use the projector, or if the discussion was going to contain some particularly disturbing content. The blinds closed with a satisfying sound, darkening the interior of the room. Immediately, the inside of the room was completely drained of the pleasant morning atmosphere, leaving behind only the cold illumination of the fluorescent lighting. After the supervisor ensured that everyone was present, he nodded to the section chief once again. With everybody on the edge of their seats, the chief stood up solemnly and began to give his report.
推定48時間前、建設大臣の孫にあたる建設省幹部の子息が誘拐された模様です。
Uh-oh.
建設大臣は事態を穏便に済ませるため、 警察へ通報せず要求に応じるものと思われます。
It seemed that approximately 48 hours earlier, the Minister of Construction's grandson, who was also the son of one of his senior staff members, was kidnapped. The reason why it was phrased that way was because the person in question didn't admit it had happened.
大臣宅の通話を監視した結果、都外からと思われる不審な電話が数件確認されました。誘拐された子供は病気療養中となっているが、通院の形跡はなく、周辺での目撃例もなく、その他いくつかの理由から事件発生は間違いないものと断定しました。
Here they omitted the details that brought this incident to light. If you think about it a bit, that meant that before this incident happened, the minister's residence had been under surveillance already. I won't use the words spied upon. Of course, there wouldn't have been court approval for this, and it would have been very hard to explain to ordinary citizens. However, it was quite an effective method to catch wind of incidents like this before they got worse. I'd like for you to understand that dealing with these cases before they become a problem is the job of the Public Safety Division.
なぜ警察に通報せず要求を鵜呑みに？
大臣たる者が警察を信用できないってんだから。
犯人グループは誘拐初期に自分たちが大臣の生活をかなり高度に監視していることを警告し、その証拠を示した様子です。大臣が屈服し、警察への通報も思いとどまるほどの何かですね。
警察へ通報してもすぐにわかるぞって？
大臣の近辺に内通者がいる可能性か。
Several of the higher-ranking members who seem to have experience with this kind of thing let out deep sighs.
犯人グループの目的が要求にあるのか、事件そのものにあるのかは不明ですが、いずれにせよ、国益を脅かす事態に発展する可能性が極めて高い。
If their goal was to simply have their demands met for monetary gain, that would have been nice. However, if this was some politically motivated shakeup, things would get a lot more complicated.
被害者の協力がないということは、脅迫内容も要求も一切不明ということか。
本件は内通者の水準がかなり高いと思われるため、当室のみの極秘捜査とします。また本件は本日より最優先事項となり、これまでの通常業務を一時凍結して対応します。よろしいですね。
After that, the supervisor continued on, tactfully explaining our course of action. If this incident were to become public, it was possible that the minister's political life would be over. I'll spare you the explanation of how the rest of the dominoes would fall, but in the end, support in the Diet would decline, followed by a no-confidence vote and a snap election. And it might even expand communist influences. That's always good. In other words, we wanted to handle this delicately.
川崎と佐伯は大臣宅、子供宅の通話を24時間監視。大臣の動向を探れ。動きがあるたびに逐一報告せよ。残る各職員は担当団体ごとに本件との関連を調査。最近動きが不穏な特殊ラインは集中的にやれ。それから外国勢力も水を漏らすな。
I've experienced one or two unamicable situations before. This, however, was the first time I've seen things get so hectic. Several sophisticated conversations were progressing without the involvement of a rookie like me. I didn't intend to be timid, but I couldn't hide my confusion at this unfamiliar situation.
では、柿内に行ってくれ。で、赤坂君は。
I snapped back to alertness upon hearing my name called.
はい。赤坂君は大臣に陳情してきた環境保護団体関連を調査してくれ。中でも新聞でも騒ぎになってるHinamizawaダム建設反対の団体をよく調査すること。住民団体の仕業とは到底思えないが、全ての可能性を潰していかなくてはならない。
わかりました。Hinamizawaダム反対か。
直接現地へ行った方がいいだろう。
Aha, to Hinamizawa we go.
現地県警で情報を取れ。かなり過激な団体らしく、向こうの公安でもマークしてるらしいぞ。
わかりました。現地へ出向します。
奥さん、出産控えてるんだって？こんなタイミングで申し訳ないけど、協力頼むよ。 時間がかけられないから人海戦術で総当たりで行くしかないんだ。
ええ、分かってます。家内も自分の都合が私の仕事に触ることを嫌いますから。
すまん、ありがとう。それから川崎くん、佐伯くん、君たちの応援には。
Damn, what a rough line of work. I didn't want to take a business trip when my wife was about to give birth. Even if I was a little busy, as long as I was in Tokyo, I could head to the hospital right away. On assignment, though, that would be difficult. Even so, I knew the work I was doing was important and fully understood that I was in no position to be selfish. I'd have to make it up to my wife for having to be away at such an important time. My wife, Yuki, would probably forgive me with a smile. The only thing she could hate doing would be holding me back. My male ego, though, at least wished she would have tried to stop me. Sorry, Yuki. I don't mind if you always complain to our child that their father couldn't come to the hospital when they were born because he was too busy with work. Yeah, I mean, that's understandable and respectful. You know, go ahead and complain. The next day, I took the bullet train to Nagoya, and from there, transferred to the train to whatever prefecture. Getting to my destination by land took several hours. If I was traveling by air, in that amount of time, I could probably get as far as Hong Kong. Whatever prefecture was by no means close. I never sat in first class except for work, but whenever I did, the seats seemed stiff. Closing my eyes, I mentally reviewed the documents I read yesterday. The group under investigation, the Onigafuchi Guardians. They were a group of residents opposed to the development proposed under the Hinamizawa Dam project. Why are they called that, though? The local protests were quite heated, and were getting more radicalized. Even limited to what was written in the newspapers, there was bloodshed that occurred during a clash with riot police, interference with the dam construction, too many to count. The number of petitions, sit-ins, and direct appeals to the relevant organizations were innumerable. As an extension of that, there was a direct appeal to the Minister of Construction the other day.
これがそもそも今回この団体を調査することになったゆえんだ。
The land they lived on was going to be submerged, so it was no wonder they would go into a frenzy over it. Even given that, though, could they really be capable of doing something like that? Or something like kidnapping the Minister of Construction's grandson in order to halt the project? From my take on it, I had serious doubts. And this kidnapping plot was extremely sophisticated and complicated enough that it was believed there was some political backing. And this wasn't something that could be pulled off by some group of local protesters. I don't know. I mean, from what we've seen, I can't doubt anything anymore. Well, just like the chief said, the plan was to eliminate all possibilities. While I'm in the whatever police's reference room taking my time investigating, the higher-ups in Tokyo would probably solve the case, without my involvement entirely. Even if that was true, I couldn't regret being away from Tokyo while my wife was ready to give birth. This was work. There was really nothing that I could do. Ding dong. The announcement that we would be arriving at our destination soon snapped me back to wakefulness. Alrighty, we're getting closer and closer.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟。
ええ、地元ではかなり賑わせているようです。
The prefectural public safety department already had the documents and a cup of tea ready and waiting for me.
早い話がダム反対の住民運動なんですが、事実上水没地域の住民すべてが決起したと言っていいでしょうね。死守なんて古風な言い方が示す通り、相当の決意と覚悟を持った連中です。そこら辺の温和な住民団体とは一線を画すと思っていただいた方がいいですね。
The stack of papers they had prepared for me in the document room was by no means thin.
発足当初はごくごく平均的な住民運動だったんです。それがいつだかの流血事件を境に急にヒートアップしまして、今では暴力主義団体かそれに準じるくらいの過激な勢力に成長したと言えますね。
Violent organizations usually indicate ones that enforce their own ideology without regards to the democratic process. Breaking that down, many of those organizations held extreme left revolutionary ideologies. Considering that, I couldn't help but be surprised that a citizens group would end up going this far. Radical citizens movements happen occasionally. It seemed, however, that this group was nothing as trifling as that. It seemed that I would have to reconsider exactly what this Onigafuchi Guardians was.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が要求。つまりダム計画の撤回を求めるために行いうる活動範囲はどの程度でしょうか。
The kidnapping of the minister's grandson was classified. That meant, of course, I couldn't tell the whatever prefectural department about it either.
ご存知の通り、先週あった犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件では逮捕者も出ています。危険性は十分にありますね。
I skimmed over the list of the criminal records related to the Onigafuchi Guardians recorded in the documents. The contents were all violent, not giving me the barest hint of a feeling that these people were trying to uphold the law.
具体的に教えていただけますか。
The chief opened up a manila envelope, fished out several unorganized sheets, and spread them out on the desk, excuse me.
建設現場への襲撃事件が最も多かったですね。初期の頃、電源コードの切断や錠前の鍵穴に石を詰める、投石による事務所の窓ガラス割り等の軽犯罪が頻発していました。
Of course, what really happened first were things like demonstrations, sit-ins, and distribution of pamphlets. Lively but democratic forms of protests. However, then the demonstrators and police clashed, which started a riot, leading to numerous injuries and arrests. It was from then on that the Onigafuchi Guardians, like their name implies, began to take a more demonic form of resistance. How fitting.
襲撃が度重なれば、地元警察による警備強化がなされるのでは。
それは警戒はしたでしょうね。でもあちらは地元ですから。闇に乗じて忍び込まれたらお手上げでしょう。
You might as well label the entire map of Hinamizawa village around the dam construction site enemy territory. No matter how alert the police were, the locals would just show them exactly how easy it was to sneak around.
警察が警備を固めてからは、むしろ挑発されたように過激化が進みました。ほら、この辺りからだいぶヒートアップしてるのがお分かりになります？
事務所の放火、建設重機の破壊工作。破壊？まさか爆弾でも？
いや、まさか。連中ですね。タンクに角砂糖を放り込むんですよ。あれやられたらエンジン焦げついちゃいますから。
Even in Japan, it seemed there had been people doing that to the vehicles of occupying forces right after the war. Compared to misdemeanors like breaking windows, it was extremely violent and aggressive.
そこまでやられたら、地元警察の面目は丸つぶれですね。
放火はさすがにですね。それで地元警察が24時間体制の人員を大幅に増員しまして、それで建設現場への襲撃は一段落したようです。
He used the words quieted down, but that was still smack dab in the middle of the list of crimes.
で、連中ですね。現場への直接攻撃が難しくなったとしたら、今度は個人攻撃に切り替えました。最初に狙われたのが工事事務所の現場作業者でした。
After that, there was silence. What was being described to me was a guerrilla war fought in the jungle. Threats and violence against the workers, harsh words and harsher rocks were thrown.
かなりの告訴がされているのに、逮捕者があまり出ていませんね。
そりゃそうです。第一、目撃者なんかいないんですから。それどころか、現行犯だったにしたって、アリバイがポンポンポンとできちゃうんです。
それはどういうことですか？
例えばですね、あなたがひなみ沢で歩いていて、ある男にナイフで刺されたとします。あなたは相手をよく覚えていて、名前も住所も特定できてるとします。
Okay.
ただし、ナイフには指紋がなく、物的証拠だけがない。まあ、ありがちな傷害事件だと思うでしょ？でも、ひなみ沢じゃ完全犯罪なんです。
Oh, there's that perfect crime terminology again. Everybody is the entire village. They're all in on it. To protect the man who is the perpetrator, they'll get their stories straight and prepare an alibi. To that end, they'll probably even forge some evidence.
裁判にもつれ込ますほかないわけですが。
You know, just having finished chapter 3, this is beautiful.
何しろ物的証拠はない上、 犯人を隠匿する証言だけは後から増えていく。検察も書類送検には二の足を踏むわけです。殺人ならいざ知らず、投石で額を切った、殴られてあざができた程度だと、仮に犯人を特定できたとしても嫌疑不十分で送検されないことがほとんどです。
Every case is without a doubt perpetrated by someone in Hinamizawa, but they can't identify who. Even if they could figure out who it is, they're unable to obtain enough circumstantial evidence through due process. The villagers were all extremely well informed about this, and so the malicious, vicious, and tenacious personal attacks continued.
被害者はそれでは納得できないでしょう。検察審査会に再審請求を出さないのですか？
それはですね、審査員たちがみんな厄介ごとに巻き込まれたくないと思っているからですよ。Hinamizawa関係のトラブルには首を突っ込みたがらないんです。
The inquest committee is comprised, of a random selection of local residents. In the event the prosecutor fails to get a conviction, they have the power to order a retrial. It's a system designed to assert the will of the people of the actions or on the actions of expert prosecutors in the legal world. In this case, however, being composed of local residents has backfired.
首を突っ込みたがらない。それはなぜです？
なんて説明すればいいんでしょう。恐れられているって言えばいいのかな。あそこはね、少し特殊なんです。
特殊？何か政治的なバックボーンが存在するということですか？
いえ、そういうのとは少し違うというか、怖がられていると思ってください。この辺りは口では少し説明しにくいんです。ああ、そうだ。わかりやすいのがありました。
Wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, he opened a file labeled as a list of members of the Onigafuchi Guardians.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の勢力にはですね、近隣の町々に強い影響力を持つ人間が多々おりまして、この辺をご覧いただけますか。
I looked, and what I saw startled me. Prefectural and municipal assembly members, staff members of the Chamber of Commerce, an executive of a business association, an executive of a town council association, and a PTA liaison. There were more than a few people with a lot of say both locally and in the neighboring regions.
この界隈では、Hinamizawaのダム反対運動は皆静観しているのが普通なんです。ダムを肯定するような発言をすると、どこでどう巡って不利益を被るかわからない。何しろ近隣の町の喉元はHinamizawa出身の人間が抑えていますからね。
検察審査員のリストは非公開でしょう。報復がされないように何らかの措置が取られているはずでは。
一応非公開でプライバシーは守られてますがね。それを管理してるのは沖宮市役所の人間、つまり地元の人間なんです。守秘義務があるとはいえ、やはり人間のつながりは分かりませんからね。Hinamizawaの人間はそのあたりのつながりがことのほか強固ですから。
When you consider the obligations and duties people have to the region, the web of information thereby formed is nothing to scoff at. And it's not uncommon for housewives in a neighborhood to know which kid from which house is what grade in which school, what subjects they're good at, and what vegetables they hate, among other things.
それにほら、Hinamizawaと遅延の深い暴力団組織がありましてね。
Oh yeah? I wonder what that is.
これが今回の騒動に全面バックアップしてるらしいんです。こちらが出てくるのが一番効いてるみたいですね。
暴力団？ダムの建設反対で住民と一致？どういう利害が一致するのか読みがたいですね。
それは難しいことじゃないです。実はですね、この暴力団の組長がですね、村の重鎮の一人の婿養子にあたりまして。
Exactly what was this Hinamizawa? I had thought it was some desolate rustic village. However, for some reason they exerted a strong influence on the surrounding areas and had a strong sense of unity. They would protect their village by any means necessary, even if that meant resorting to violence. The chief had said they were afraid because there were numerous influential people living there, but somehow I got the feeling that they were afraid of the village itself. There was something clearly different from what I had read in the documents in Tokyo. This was no simple residential protest against the dam. For some reason, an uneasy feeling began to nestle itself at the back of my mind. I chose the most basic way to ask my question. In other words, I directly asked what I wanted to know.
室長、これは例えば仮の話ですが。
はい。
例えば、その鬼ヶ淵主導名がダム計画を頓挫させるため、例えば要人を脅迫するようなことは考えられますか？
The chief replied immediately.
ありえるでしょう。
Ooh.
事実、彼らは市役所や県庁、建設省の工事事務所にも押しかけ、恫喝まがいのことをしていますし、工事関係者の家族が不審者につけ回されたという事件も起こっています。
The thing is, when we saw that scene in the prologue, it was over in Okonomiya, right? The neighboring town or whatever that we always, tend to go to, especially for that angel mort. That happened there, and I mean, people from Hinamizawa go there. I really wouldn't put it past, the citizens of the village going there to do something, Well, that would make sense. To halt progress on the dam, they raided the construction site, destroying heavy machinery and lighting the construction office on fire. If they didn't have any qualms about doing that, threats and violence against people related to the dam would probably be no problem. But that was it. Even your everyday hoodlum could use threats and violence. However, this time it was the kidnapping of the minister's grandson, an abnormally high-level crime. Not only was pulling off the kidnapping difficult in the first place, but so was maneuvering to have the ministers surrender to their demands immediately. There was no way this was the work of amateurs. Did these people have the power to enact this large of a crime? What was the heart of the matter? Or that was the heart of the matter. Was the Onigafuchi Guardians an organization capable of pulling this off? In other words, to ask that question once again, I chose the most basic method. Direct.
例えば、政府要人の関係者を誘拐して脅迫なんてことがあり得ると思いますか？
There's no way they could pull off something that big. That was the answer I most hoped for. If it was that answer, my work was as good as halfway done. I might be able to get back in time for my wife to give birth. And that was how it was supposed to be. The chief, without a hint of hesitation, replied,
やるかもしれません。
well, duh.
そこの知れない連中ですから。
Sorry, Yuki. Seemed like my work wouldn't end so simply after all. I mean, we even knew that it wasn't going to be this simple. Of course it's not going to. It's Hinamizawa. Obviously.
ご苦労さん。担当地域での情報収集はどうですか？
順調です。これから現地警察の公安と接触できることになりましたので、現地へ向かう予定です。東京の調査の方はどうですか？
他の職員も順調に調査を進めている。
Damn, the hounds are really going at it outside.
でも調べる団体が星の数だからね。そんなに悠長に時間もかけられないし。
There were no new developments at this time. No matter how suspicious the Onigafuchi Guardians was, if they solved the case in Tokyo, my job was done. And it looked like my wishful thinking wouldn't come to pass. Of course not. Hanging up the phone, I let my gaze drift outside the window to the valley of unfamiliar buildings.
赤坂さん、今お貸しできる車が戻ってきました。ご案内しますので、こちらへどうぞ。
あ、すみません。
God damn. Sorry, I have rat dogs. He showed me the elevator to the underground parking lot where a battered sedan was waiting for me. The steering wheel kept drifting to the left is a little concerning, but it would be enough to get me around for a while. I mean, it is what it is. Ah, now this is a scene. My destination was Shishibone City, whatever prefecture, an area under the control of the Onigafuchi Guardians. The Okonomiya police station was right on the front lines. Okay, maybe this is where I'm thinking that this took place. Shishibone? I don't know. I always forget where we're at and where we're going and what place each area is. Sometimes I even forget what the village is at times. It's a tough life. Okonomiya police station. We're getting much closer now. Like, as close as we've ever been. Maybe this is where I was thinking of. Alright, well, I'm gonna go yell at my dogs, but before that, let's end the episode. Thank you all for watching this one. Very interesting how this story, or where the story is taking place. and the direction it might be going. It might give us some insight on some things, especially from an outside perspective, which I originally wasn't thinking about. You know, the politics, you know, what the outside thinks of the Hinamizawa village and how it looks from the outside, you know? I think this will be a very interesting story, especially since we're having a perspective that's not Keiichi's, which is, at this point, what I desire, because, wow. Anyways, thank you for watching this episode. Glad I was able to get my feet wet with this one, and we'll continue along. Probably not at the speed that I was going with Chapter 3, because I was in on that, just wanting to know what was going to happen next. We'll take it nice and slow with this one, and hope you all will join me for it. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz. I'm not actually going to yell at my dog, but make sure you guys have a good one. Take it easy.